In this video, we're going to talk about how AI is going to impact the American dream, or if it's already impacting the American dream. This is Don. Don, glad to have you here today.
Good to be here, Dennis, as always.
Don and I have known each other since elementary school, and I think it's fair to say we've had a chance to live the American dream.
Yes.
What does that really mean to live the American dream? So it's different for everybody, but for me, it's having the chance to live in a free country. Okay, but lots of countries are free. Lots of countries have democracies where you elect your leaders and you have an impact and a voice in how you're going to be governed. But there's something special, in my opinion, about the American dream that's different than really any other country out there. And so what does that mean to me? Well, it means one is you're free to speak your mind. You know, if you say something in a public forum, the government is not going to come knocking on your door and say, hey, we heard what you said. And now I've had a chance to live, into my 60s. It's not just freedom, but it's freedom on a scale like the world has not seen. United States of America is a huge country, and it goes from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Pacific Ocean. It's got a lot of amazing things in between. So for me, that freedom to live in this grand country and experience it and be able to move freely across it for a job, for travel, for whatever, and experience America, to me is the American dream. And I have concerns, and Don will hear from you in a second, what artificial intelligence is going to do to that. Don, what are your thoughts as we go into this
I
topic?
think it's an extremely complicated topic. And the reason is because it somewhat depends upon what you believe the American dream is and is comprised of. What I mean by that is, first thing I did when we came up with this topic was I went out and said, hey, define the American dream. And of course, it seemed like there were two predominant ones, and you hit on part of one of them. So what it said was, the pursuit of happiness, for all.
Mm-hmm.
And so, quoted from the Declaration of Independence, I believe. And then the other one was, the work ethic, the Protestant work ethic. So,
Mm-hmm.
hard work, individual effort, thrift, and if you work hard, you'll succeed, and that's the American dream is if I go there and I give it a good try, I'll be rewarded.
Something good
And then,
here.
your definition of, well, there's freedom. And, I really love your definition because that to me is the most important part of America by far, and it's ridiculous, but I'm actually, the hair is standing up on my arms right now. So, it means that much. And it's not available necessarily in the rest of the world. It is available in a fair amount of it, and that's great. I think that's the influence that America has had, but it's not available everywhere. And we really need to protect that part of the American dream. So how's AI going to influence it? Well, depending upon those definitions, I think that's going to change the impact of AI. So freedom of speech is AI going to take away freedom of speech? Well, you could say that with freedom of speech, there's always been the issue of, you can speak freely, but you can't speak falsehoods freely. You can't damage freely. You can't yell fire in the theater,
Mm-hmm.
right? So AI should enable us to have a better idea of what's true and false. So it should be more at our fingertips. Now, certainly models can be misaligned. People could select specific data sets that would, align with their own views instead of just, trying to come up with basic facts. All of that is possible. But it's hard denying the fact that AI is going to provide an ease with which to retrieve information and to accumulate that information intelligently that hasn't existed until now. And so that should be an assistance in terms of, having good information, which I equate to freedom of speech. Okay. But when you come to some of the other definitions, in particular,
Well, let's
go ahead.
before you jump off freedom of speech.
Sure. Yeah.
To me, it's not so having access to the truth. The truth can be debated on almost any topic.
Oh, for sure.
Probably even mathematics and economics, maybe not
Sure.
mathematics or physics, but you can bend things your way. So to me, it's not about what's true or what's not true and fact checking or anything like that. It's really the ability to speak your mind, and not just for me, but for others to speak. I don't care if they're wrong. They can be 100% wrong.
Oh, right. No, I completely agree. I don't want to imply at all that misinformation should be denied because, again, the exchange of ideas is what it's all about, the freedom to exchange those ideas. But I do think it's valuable for people to be able to, it used to be when you're sitting on the porch with your neighbor and your neighbor said something and you said something. Well, that was their point of view, but you had no idea, what the reality was. And, now we're discovering more and more about how memories are sort of recreated. And so you can't really we're in our 60s, Dennis, so we definitely can't trust our memory, but it turns out no one can
Mhm.
trust their memory. So, but my only point is that, I think it's going to be valuable to uh, to be able to get more and better organized and better vetted information. I don't think that that can be a bad thing, and I think that everyone will be able to get it. So that's freedom of speech as well, right? It's not only my ability to speak, it's also, you know, other people's ability to hear that speech. And so certainly AI is going to enable that as well, I think. And so that's what I was trying to communicate, and probably poorly, is that the exchange of ideas, I don't think AI is going to inhibit that in any way. And perhaps I think, in fact, that it will enhance it, the ability to exchange ideas.
To some extent, I think you made a good point. If you go back in time, yeah, you're on the back porch with your neighbor, talking. Now, with social media, and you can almost be anonymous, and you can put things out there. And when people are on social media, and Don, look at, you and me are here looking at each other, talking to each other. And
Yeah.
but one thing we have as an advantage is we know each other from way, way back. And I think that's one of the things about this podcast is we can have very different ideas about things and talk about them, but still respect each other, which I think has
Yeah.
been, and even like each other as friends, which I think has been lost to, I don't know, a large extent. Maybe it's overplayed if it's a large extent, but there's
I
definitely
think it's a
been,
large extent.
yeah, to a large extent. I wouldn't argue with you there. But the thing is, I would rather support that person's ability to say something I disagree with very strongly than suppress that person. And
That's
I think AI is going to give power to discern all these conversations out there. It could very easily, if you look in Europe, I mean, Jesus, Europe has nothing near the First Amendment, which guarantees your ability to speak freely without government interference. So the governments and institutions and people will be able to discern and look at this conversation we're having right now. And if we say
yeah.
anything that's offensive or misinformation, AI will be able to pick up on it and potentially shut it down. The one
Yeah.
thing, the government can't interfere with our ability to speak freely. And you mentioned the things that, about you can't slander somebody. And there's some instances where you cannot speak freely, but by far, you are in legal precedent, and the Constitution says it clearly. The government cannot interfere with your ability to speak. Well, but can AI interfere with your ability to speak? Can AI look
Um,
through all these conversations and build platforms and networks that then does what government can't do and shut you down?
well, here's where I think it's important to draw a line between the people creating AI and AI. So the thing about AI is, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, I think, and that's that, when you're creating AI, you have to be really careful about what your
So
goals
our
are,
intent is
and
clear,
really careful
Yes, and
about
we
what your
translate that
intent
into a
is,
model.
and you've got to
Then we
check
check
very
alignment and
carefully
test.
that that
and we
intent
monitor
is
for
being,
improvements.
Continuous
ingrained
process.
in your
Exactly.
AI model. So is there the ability for bad actors to take away free speech? Certainly, but that's an ability that's not peculiar to AI. I mean, social media has eroded confidence in free speech probably more than AI ever will. And that's just a simple algorithm. Now, AI is more powerful, and so maybe it'll be able to do that even better than social media. But that's just because AI is going to be able to do everything better. So it'll be able to do evil better, and it'll be able to do good better. But I don't think that it's. I don't think just AI without the intent of the human involved is bad for freedom of speech. I guess that's how I'd put it. And I'll let you respond to that.
Well, I'm not gonna disagree with you. I think it's still playing out
Yeah.
what AI can do, what algorithms are evolving. And so I definitely have concerns just because it could be misused. And I think you talked about the humans behind the algorithms. Well, these algorithms are gonna be learning from themselves. They're gonna be become self-learning cycles. And so the AI will be tweaking the AI. It won't be humans tweaking the AI. But
Well, that's fair.
I think the dust hasn't settled on that. I definitely have concerns.
Yeah.
Where it's starting to become clearer is work and the
Agreed.
American dream, and you spoke on it very well about put your nose to the grindstone. Y-
Right.
And we're both examples of this. Life didn't come easy to us. For what we have at this moment in life, we had to work pretty darn hard for it. We had to make sacrifices for it. And this is where it's starting to become clearer that AI is going to be doing the work. So,
That's right.
yeah. So, what does that do to the American dream when you're not really, and granted, we're not there yet, but it's worth talking about
Yeah,
when
for
you don't
sure.
have to work for the American dream. Where does that take us as a country, as a people?
Yeah, I think short term, there's going to be what economists like to call frictional, unemployment, and it's going to start at the top, not at the top, I should say. It's going to start in the middle, sort of the middle management, successful career level, and down to, and this is on the white collar side. And then very shortly, the entry level jobs are going to disappear. And in fact, that's already confirmed. That's starting to
Yeah.
happen. So that's on the white collar side. And then the blue collar side, if you're in the trades, if you're not in the trades, go learn a trade, especially if you're young. Gives you a chance to, a lot of time work outdoors and, do great things with your hands and all the things that people in the trades talk about loving for good reason. And you're needed and you're going to continue to be needed for a while. But as I've said, robots are coming.
Well,
And so,
let's
yeah,
uh I wouldn't say the trades are safe. If you're a driver, if you're a truck driver, taxi
good
driver,
one.
Waymo, driverless cars,
Right?
nobody's, you know, you're nobody's safe. Yeah, plumbers are safe for a while, maybe for 10 years. But if you're
Yeah,
20 years old and you're looking at a profession, you go, yeah, I'll be fine as a plumber for 10 years. And then all these modular systems come in.
that's exactly right.
Yeah, you're
So is the American dream dead for the young people? And I still say no, and I'll tell you why. It's just,
okay.
just because you're not going to be able to do the jobs that used to be available doesn't mean that there's not going to be work available. So what if, AI can provide for humans, agriculturally, industrially, intellectually, we'll discover the universe, we'll be well fed, these things are all talked about and actually seem sort of realistic suddenly. But does that mean that does that mean that you stop dreaming? That's where I don't think so. And so it's going to become extremely valuable for, those people who have creative thoughts, that can figure out how to use this technology in order to accomplish those large goals. And even once the goals are accomplished, it'll be the creativity, of what to do in a world where there's not scarcity. And, you don't have to work, but I don't think that necessarily means that you won't. But my only point is that, I don't think those dreams are going to go away. And I think it's important that the sort of freedoms that you're talking about survive and that we don't, just because we've now provided for everything, we don't suddenly decide that it's those sorts of freedoms aren't important anymore. They absolutely will be for the well being of the species. right? As long as people
Oh,
are
what is
around,
it?
they're gonna
Let
want to be able
watch.
to think and
Wow, that's
reason and be
incredible. The colors are
creative and
perfect.
work with their fellow
Thanks. I'm really
humans.
happy
We're a
with it.
social species, and so I don't think the American dream has to die, even if everything is provided for us. And I would
Well
hope
done.
that in the rest of the world, in fact, if there's no scarcity, it would be less. I don't know why you would need to control people if there's no scarcity, right? I mean, I'm not saying there wouldn't be laws. Of course, there'd be laws, but you would hope that if there's no scarcity, that people and governments would provide more freedoms, not less. And yes, I know that sounds incredibly naive.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
that's the idealist in me. Yeah,
argue back on the control. And I admire the optimism as far as people. When you were talking, I had a phrase that came to mind, and that's idle hands. Idle hands make devil's work. And you're thinking idle hands make good work. Idle hands are creative. Idle hands will love the abundance and revel in it, and we won't even need to be controlled because everybody's just so happy.
I'm. Yeah, I know. It sounds incredibly naive, but
I'm watching 1883 right now. Is it
yeah,
1883? The Taylor
yeah.
Sheridan, and they're going west. And but if there's ever an example of an American dream, geez, these immigrants on this wagon train. Right now they're in Texas, and they're dying. They're getting bit by snakes. They're drowning in river crossings. They're killing each other. And that is the quintessential American dream. It's over 100 years old, so we're not finding new frontiers, so to speak. But it's that purpose of striving for something. To me, that's a big part of that American dream. And you're dreaming of something. A dream is something that will happen, not you're in a steady state of bountifulness. That's not the American dream. The American dream is striving. And when you take
Oh,
away
I see.
that
So yeah.
purpose, yeah, when you take away that purpose, I think you take away the American dream. The dream is not this steady state present of having food on your table and lots of nice hobbies and being provided for with whatever universal basic income. It's striving. And if you no longer strive, you miss a step. It's troublesome to me. And
Well,
so I'm probably less optimistic than you about this. What happens when you take away that purpose of what is your purpose now to create something that's interesting? Is that now driving you? And that's not an American dream. That's just keeping busy, or it's doing something that gives you entertainment. But that to me is not the American dream.
yeah, well, that's fair. The American dream is definitely different for everyone. And I will say one important point that you made there was America being the land of opportunity. That's also part of the American dream, right? So having that
Right.
opportunity, the fact that it was a big country, people
Hmm.
came here and figured, I can make it. I can make it on my own. There's ample space. There's ample resources. If I work
Hmm.
hard, I can make it. Right. Completely agree with you. I think you really nailed the topic. Freedom is the American dream.
Hmm.
Not just opportunity.
Yeah. And
So
freedom on, yeah, go ahead.
no, no, no. That's
Yeah.
pretty much done.
Freedom on a scale that history has never seen, and probably never will see again. I'm a little surprised I'm more pessimistic than you, Don. Aren't you the guy that said they had a nickname for you in the workplace, Doctor Doom or something like that?
The voice of doom.
The voice of doom. There you go.
Yeah.
And here you are. You're going, we're just going to all sit around the campfire and sing Kumbaya, and we're going to be making art and creating content on the internet, and everybody's going
All
to
those
be happy.
You know how those work meetings are, though. Everyone sits around telling the bosses what they want to hear. And everyone's agreeing, and it's just wonderful. And it's going to be great success, and everyone's going to
This
get
growth
normal,
initiative targets new
enormous
markets and
bonuses and
innovation
goody,
to
goody,
boost our
goody,
profitability. Client
and
focus is
yeah,
our key
then the
differentiator.
boss would turn to me and goes,
As a
I'm kind of
consultant, have you
curious
stress
what the
tested
voice
this for
of
market
doom has to
volatility?
say.
You need to consider the
Well,
risks.
but here's the thing, Don. You're being way too optimistic. You are the voice of optimism for this,
Not
and
exactly.
I like it. I like it, but I think you're a little off.
I'm
I think idle hands do make devils work. I think, I'm the guy, the gal that decided, you know what, I'm going to commit to learning the law. I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to pass the bar. And okay, big mistake. Now AI is doing all that. They're not hiring new lawyers.
no,
Thank goodness universal basic income came along and now I don't have to worry about money. I've got food. I
no,
probably don't have as much as I'd like. So I'm going to get my politicians. I'm going to say, hey, our universal basic income needs to go up.
yeah,
And we're going to fight over, yeah, abundance creates, you think it doesn't create fighting. And sometimes it creates more infighting of people.
right.
And
So
and here's the
I got
thing,
okay.
I'm now this, let's say young, let's turn the clock back 40 years and
Hmm.
40 years, my God. And I'm now, I thought I was this special achiever and I was pursuing that American dream and I was doing it the right way. I was working hard through my education and getting, training myself to learn, let's say, the law. It could be medicine, it could be accounting, it could be who knows what else, at least in the white collar jobs. And now I'm lumped in with somebody that never, let's put it in not so gently, they were lazy or they had no drive. They didn't apply themselves. They never went out and cut grass and make some extra money so they could buy that bicycle. And now we're all lumped together. We're all, getting our money and I look around and I go, I don't see an American dream. I see me just and a bunch of other people with not much to
Oh, the
do
UBI
other
payment just
than
hit. No
make
way,
sure
for
we
all of
get our
us?
ding
Yeah,
on our
look,
phone
here
when
it
that
is.
check
This
comes
is
in once a month
amazing.
or
To
maybe
good
twice a month.
times.
Cheers.
Yeah.
And go buy those tennis shoes I've been waiting on because I got plussed up on my account. I'm very
Right.
happy about these new tennis shoes. Yeah, there's my American dream, Don.
Well, okay, first of all, everybody's dream is different, and I think freedom's
Well,
about
that you think okay, but
allowing
you
people
you
to pursue their dream. But
okay,
let me
so
peel
just
the
waiting
onion
on
of what
these
you just
tennis
said a bit.
shoes, waiting on these tennis shoes and getting them in the mail, that's the American dream? You can't say
Maybe.
that's a version of the American dream.
Well, no, but what I said was, and I will unpeel a bit from what you said. What I said was optimistic, in that I'm saying that if people are provided their freedoms to pursue happiness, and if they get happiness from that pair of shoes, then well, God bless them. If you happen to watch this podcast, please give us some comments. Tell us what you want us to talk about. Tell us where we're idiots. Make us more interested in the topic. We just love to hear more and understand more of the things that either we're missing or that we're not saying that ought to be said.
Yeah, that's well said, Don.